right, welcome to, what week is this? I don't even remember at this point. Is this the beginning of week 4? Beginning of week 4. So tonight's topic is just open table. Whatever anyone wants to chat about, go for it. We don't have anything planned. Next week we do have a planned topic. Next week is April tags. But for this week, it's just anything anybody wants to talk about. Questions, you want to share a status update, share a video, you want to share your screen and share your CAD. All of that stuff is good to go. Anybody want to start?
I posted our YouTube week 4 update or week 3 update. If you guys want to take a look at it, but if you have questions about that, kind of where we're at.
Our team finished our robot CAD last week, and we've started the fabrication of the robot. We've gotten a little bit behind where we want to be because we've been having an issue with the max tube where we weren't expecting the side hole punches to not be aligned with the vertical hole punches, because in the drawings they don't actually align those. So we've been having a fun time adapting our design on the fly to figure out how to account for that, which is unfortunate.
So, Ian, we had the same issue last year, and we talked to Rev about it. And I was very clear that they should make that very clear on their pages, and clearly they have not. So I'll take that up with them again. But what we ended up doing this year is that we made sure to only use the top holes or the side holes.
Yeah, that's what we're planning to do in future seasons, but we already bought theirs, and West Coast Products is out of stock for now, so we'll be using them. If the on-shape file decides to load, and it looks like people are looking at placing electronics in it right now based on those blocks on the side. It's kind of similar to the unqualified Quokka's robot in 3 days, but with the Grasshoppers style intake that goes under the bumper but still has a full width. And we chose that because we like that the arm could have an adjustable angle for shooting, and then also being able to get the amp. Taking its time loading.
What kind of Swerve modules do you guys have, Ian?
We're using Mark IVs. We are planning to switch to Mark IV eyes, but then the wait time for them got really high. And we are probably going to be stuck on level 1s for the season because the gearing was supposed to come back in stock this week, and then they got pushed back by 2 weeks, and then we emailed them, and they're like, we don't actually know if it's coming back in stock, so that's unfortunate.
Right.
Are the pinion conversion kits still in stock? Because that might be an option to gear it up a little bit higher.
I think the pinion conversion kits are only for Mark IV eyes, correct? Or
yeah.
Are they
Because the
also
Mark
available for Mark IVs?
I think it's just the Mark IV eyes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So since we had this problem last year, I'll just go through what we did this year quickly. So Ian's got the tubes for the frame butted up against each other, right, in their models. So that's what we did last year, and then we put end caps in the end of the tubes, and we bolted the frame together and then attached the Swerve modules, and then proceeded to have to slot out and oversize the holes in the tubing for a good 3 practices while we went back and forth trying to get everything to fit, and it was a nightmare. And so the holes on the side of the tube were up to a hair over a 1/16 of an inch off from the holes on the top of the tube. So that created quite a bit of an issue for us. So this year what we did is the tubes are mounted to the Swerve modules, and then the corners are filled with 3D printed pieces that go into both tubes. And So we're not relying on the holes to get those 3D printed pieces into place.
Yeah, the biggest place we're running into issues right now is with our under the bumper intake area right here, just because you have the stacked frame plus the intake. So we'll see how that goes, but I think we have some custom gussets we're planning to machine because we were able to find some consistency, but not too much between our tubes. And trying to make this not Onshape's just not being. It doesn't like doing Onshape with sharing my screen and camera probably, so I won't be able to actuate the arm. But,
And you guys said that this is the Rev box, is that right?
yeah, this is the Rev.
I don't know that any suppliers guarantee that the alignment of the holes on different sides.
We looked at the drawings between Rev and West Coast Products. West Coast Products gives a distance from the end for both dimensions of their tubing versus Rev sneakily in their dimensions. They only give a guaranteed half-inch from the end for one of the two holes and not both of them. And so you're not actually guaranteed to have them align, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. The other thing to keep in mind is that the drawings that vendors share are not production drawings that they use to make their parts. Right? So they're almost never toleranced. And so just keep in mind that there will be some variation. It might be minor on West Coast, but there will be slight variation on how far they are from the end.
Just to jump in, so Jason, you said plus or minus 30, off by 60 thousandths roughly. You said a 1/16 of an inch, right?
Yep.
Huh, that's interesting. I wonder what their process is and what their tolerance really is supposed to be.
Yeah. So yeah, Ian, one solution to those side plates is to match drill them. Right. So get the first bolt in and then match drill. So like tape it on, use a clamp it on, and then come through and drill them to match. Right. And your two side plates will be different, like your right and your left one. But they'll line up. And
everything will line up. Yeah, I think we have some plans to mitigate it. But it's something that we didn't take into account with our design, and now we're getting set back a little bit by.
Yeah, or move up to like an ASME loose fit, which is a pretty loose fit around your bolt. I have a different question if we're ready to move on. Several people on my team really want to paint some polycarbonate. Has anyone painted polycarbonate before? And what success or failures have people had? And how do I make sure that John's not mad at me when we leave little paint chips all over the field?
I'd be really concerned about that. Like,
well,
it's not me that's going to be mad at you, Jason. It's going to be the field supervisor.
I know, but you're not even going to let it get there, probably.
No, I think if you treat it like you would treat PVC, just rough it up with how you call it, a brush, not with a sander, real well, and give it that roughness, and give it, use a paint that has a primer in it. You should be fine. But if you're gonna just use just paint, no primer, then, well, you never heard this from me.
All right.
I think you'd be better off going to a print shop and getting a big vinyl sticker made for it.
No, that's kind of.
We put those on polycarb for probably over a decade now.
That's kind of how we. That's kind of how we were gonna go. Just print something, stick it on there. That way, if it falls, if paint fails, then we don't have a problem. But if you want to be artistic, you got to brush it off a bit to make it rough.
All right.
Yeah, I'd be
Sorry, I got another question for if someone else don't have
with the polycarb. I'd be kind of nervous about what's in the paint too, because even like isopropyl can ruin the finish of polycarbonate.
Yeah.
As well as like you gotta be really careful with Loctite, obviously. So I would, if you're going to paint it, be very careful about what paint you're choosing.
Yeah.
It's acrylic paint, so it's not going to eat the polycarbonate, and if it does flake, it's probably all going to start coming off. Cool. Thanks, everyone.
I got a question for Jesse Frost. I think he's in here somewhere. He just posted a YouTube video. That is, so Jesse, are you using the rev actuator to lift there, or are you planning on using the rev actuator to lift that?
The things that we've tried so far were the chain and proc. We're doing basically a copy of the unqualified on a swerve base, basically is what we're up to. And we tried the chain and sprocket kind of very rudimentary and a lot of slop and a lot of chain skipping. I know there's ways to prevent that. We tried the max planetary through a 90-degree gearbox ×2 on each side. And there was a lot of slop in that too. I thought it was mostly in that gearbox or the 90-degree rev gearbox. So we mounted the max planetaries directly to the shaft that makes that arm pivot. And there's still quite a bit of slop in there. And I know you can take that out with tension or gas shocks or things like that, or you can take it out in one direction, basically. So now we've tried to do this linear slide thing that you can see in the video there. It's just an Ingus slide with an Ingus lead screw and nut. It's mounted to the carriage that comes with the Ingus slide that we all have gotten in their kit of parts before. Run by a Falcon on a Sport or a 5.7 Sport gearbox. I got a few different ratios I can try. Right now it's on 100 to 1. It's going to be probably ridiculously slow. But I think the pivot on that is going to be slop free eventually, because I don't think there's going to be any slop in that lead screw. And the only little bit of slop that you might get there is just on where the bar essentially mounts to the carriage and the arm. I'm just looking for something where it's going to be, if you have a set point, where it's going to go to that set point and not have any backlash in it. So that was my creation.
So because we are doing exactly the same mechanism, and I think I did email Ian, your coach, earlier about that. So did you use the 60 teeth sprocket or 64? Because Andy Mark didn't seem to have the for the 35 pound, didn't seem to have the 60 teeth sprocket, but they had a 64. And then we decided to go 64 to 14, and that's just too many, skipping and slacks, and we decided to use a tensioner and to see if that would help, but that just it's not helpful. And I saw another team that I think it's 5348. They posted a video on YouTube earlier. They seem to have the chain and sprocket going, and I'm not sure how they maybe they have a lumberjack on that team.
They did Unqualified release their technical binder. It's like a 5-page PDF. I can try to find it and post it. But and they did talk about how they kind of conquered the backlash problem, at least to their satisfaction. And it seemed like it would work. I just wanted to try something different, kind of, and I don't know, I didn't have any big 35 sprockets, so we were using 25 chain, one on each side with I think we had a 60 tooth and a 16 tooth or something like that. And yeah, like I said, just a lot of floppiness.
With the monstrosity of the armor we have, and I think that's something else that I told the kids, they have to do is try to see how we can make that a little lighter and make it a little bit more compact. Because with the size of what we have on right now, a 25 would not do a good justice. It will, you'll be lucky if it doesn't break somewhere, in actual match scenario.
Yeah, I wouldn't run it as a 25. We were just kind of testing a concept, and I didn't really like the concept, and I didn't really want to put a ton of time into trying to fix that concept. I posted the Google Drive of the unqualified technical binder PDF, which is kind of insightful. They talked about how they use that 3D printed tensioning block to some success and other things. I just don't know how teams go about making a good tight chain setup. We've never really accomplished that very well before ourselves.
Yeah, so Jesse, this is Tracy from Firebears. What we're doing this year, we're using the Banebot gearboxes again, like we did for our arm last year. And they're going to be below the, sprockets that are on the arm. And we're just going to have different shims. So we're going to elevate them off of our base plate so we can run wires underneath, but we'll have then shims underneath them. And we'll just use that as the tensioning because they bolt underneath, and so it'll be able to pull them down. They also are a lot better gearbox than like the Versa Planetaries and stuff. A lot more rugged. They're definitely heavier, but last year we did our double jointed arm with our shoulders direct drive, and we were able to do that with those.
Yeah, I wouldn't use Versa Planetaries on any kind of heavy pivot.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And we had a Rev Absolute encoder on our axles, and we were able to have set points with the stuff last year really well.
Yeah, we're planning on putting a Rev through bore encoder on there, and with our elevators and stuff, we had no problem with that. But with an arm, it's a little bit different because you have, it weighs a ton at first, and then it ends up weighing nothing. And
yeah, depending on the angle, definitely. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, you definitely want to make sure you have your gearing good enough, and you have a gearbox that is rated for the torque that you're going to put on it.
I hope to get our little linear slide thing going probably tomorrow night. And if I do, I'll take some video and I'll post it to our YouTube thing that you have the link to now. But I think that'll work. But
yeah, the other thing you might do is you could use springs or a counterbalance, weight to help offset the heaviness. That's how they do it with elevators in the real world and other, mechanisms, amusement park rides. That way.
With our current setup, we have those 125-to-1 Falcons through the Max Planetaries, and we're running those at like 8%, and it'll lift the arm no problem. It's not really the power issue with that right now. It's just the movement that you get that is not controlled by the motor. Exactly. And I think if you have PDI loops and you're good at it, or PID loops, you can that'll take out some of that backlash, kind of, from what I understand. But
yeah, you can do that. The other thing that I'd recommend is definitely make sure your students know how to use a feed forward loop, or feed forward controller. So basically it'll vary the amount of output just based on what angle it's trying to go to, which accounts for like the varying torque with a rotational joint like that.
Sure. Yep.
I can share what 2129 has been working on. If I can pull up this meeting on my laptop to show our CAD, but I'll give that a try. In short, we're building a over-the-bumper style intake, much more like a 2022 robot almost. largely because we did an arm last year, so we really didn't want to do that again. Not because it was bad, but because just new experience is definitely important. Yeah, we're not quite done with our CAD yet, unfortunately, but we're getting there. So here's what we've got so far. It's kind of chaotic, but so we've got our over the bumper intake at the back of our robot. Yeah, Mark IV eyes. We're doing Kraken drive motor, Falcon turn motor, and then we have L3s with the conversion kit to make them even faster. Just trying to maximize speed. We've got we're running two climber setups. Using the West Coast products blocks to save a lot of development time there, and then custom gearboxes. In terms of like indexing, we have these two wheels here will spin opposite each other. Again, like a lot like a 2022 robot, and filter the node in from there. Should then be stored underneath this roller, which will spit it into our shooter. We might replace that with pneumatics, but it's probably going to stick as a roller. It might get bigger as well. The shooter is like pretty standard Coulson wheels, offset. Did a bunch of prototyping about that. And then to activate that up and down, we have a giant 10 dp gear at the bottom, which we're 3D printing, and then a corresponding one driven by a Falcon. So that'll allow us to get the full range of motion to shoot from pretty much anywhere we want to. The elephant in the room is the arm that we have, which I said we weren't doing an arm, but we kind of are. This is our amp and trap mechanism. So it's a virtual 4-bar and allows us to pick up from the floor on the opposite side or from the chute, and then score both amp and trap pretty quickly. And so that'll stow on the opposite side of our robot with like the end effector upward here. I think that's about it. In terms of like what we've actually machined so far, our drivetrain's completely done. Climbers are done. We'll be probably driving around with most of our robot done by the end of the week. We just have to get some CNC time in pretty much. The other thing that we've been talking about a lot was like pneumatics or not to do pneumatics basically. We have room for a compressor in here, but we'd still have to find room for a pneumatic like air tank. But the main things are like we'd be using it on our climbers. If the friction brakes come back in stock, they're out of stock from West Coast products right now, especially because of that 5 seconds you have to stay up at the end of the match. It might be kind of tricky with just brake mode, but we're just going to test that, and that'll basically decide if we're going to do pneumatics or not. We're already deploying our intake with a motor geared 50-1. So that probably would not be replaced with pneumatics, but where we might use pneumatics is to index the notes into our shooter, because we found that a follow-through is very important to get an accurate shot. So we could mount pneumatics basically underneath and have a flap pull the note into the shooter. But that's all still to be determined pretty much once we start getting the final one machined. Are there any questions?
Hey, Mason.
Yeah.
So how are you going to account for, that's a question for, I mean, everybody in the room, with the whole, when a note falls out in there, and how do you get it out?
Yeah, that's a good question. The main thing is this is not really done yet. There's a big flap that comes down across from basically these rollers a little bit before them to this bar on our intake, which has one joint in it and is held with springs, so that when we pull the intake up, that goes up as well. So our main approach is to just stop stray notes from getting in and stop the notes that we want in from getting out. And then we'll have these big panels along the side. That's kind of what I'm working on tonight, more or less. So that's our idea there.
Yeah, well, yeah, and like, if someone shot something and they miss and they come deflect off of something and land in the middle of your robot, now you don't want to be out of commission.
Of course. Yeah, I think sponsored panels are going to help a lot with that too. They're hidden in this model, but especially kind of large ones on the sides to stop notes from getting in. most of our robot will be covered from the top, so we're not that concerned about it. But definitely we'll try that during testing. Are there any other questions about that?
Yeah, can you hear me all right? Or
Yeah.
so for your arm, are you thinking of just doing that with the amp, or do you think that can get the trap too?
It can get the trap too in our current geometry. This is not the most up-to-date geometry of it. Still have to pull that from PDM, but with the up-to-date one, we are able to score in the trap as well. So that still, we need to test it. We're working on a prototype for just making sure the geometry all works, but in CAD it does. Yeah. Well, if there's not any more questions, that's pretty much what we've been working on. We only have like 2 CAD people, so it's been a journey.
Hey, Ian.
Yeah.
All right. What do you have for drive motors?
For drive motors, we plan on using vortexes, and then for turn motors, we'll be using neos. Right now, it's just 8 neos, though.
I've got something of an idea if you want to work on gear ratio. I'll share it with you when I've got the CAD done.
Okay. This will be interesting.
Have you had any problems with your vortexes? I know some people are having some CAN issues and some other stuff.
Yeah, so we've actually had wonderful experiences with our vortexes so far, especially in prototyping. It was really nice to, when we were prototyping our shooters, just kind of stick a piece of hex shaft through the motor, and then, wire it to the Rio and kind of just be done. And, it was almost as simple as like hooking up a drill, which was, super nice, especially for that one-to-one driving. We haven't tested them with the 8mm shafts yet, just because we haven't had really a need to. Although we did some run-out testing, mainly because someone on the team, me, did not throw out the bad or mark the bad shafts when we got the new shafts. And so they got mixed together. And then I had to sort them out. The run-out was really bad on the bad shafts, but on the new shafts seems to be fixed, which is, nice that they actually work. We haven't had issues with our spark flexes, but we'll be getting the new ones on Monday because of the whole recall situation. And then we plan to buy enough to use on for our drive base when they come back in stock on the 30th.
Ian, how many devices have you had on the CAN network so far with the Vortex and the Flex?
We've only hooked up 2 vortexes to a CAN network so far.
So that's why you haven't had problems yet. When you connect a number of devices, I've talked with Greg about this quite a bit. We literally only had 2 vortexes, but we had I think 12 Spark Maxes and pneumatic hub and all the other devices on our practice robot. When you get a lot of devices, the CAN freaks out, and I've been told it's going to be figured out on firmware update 24.1.5 or 0.0.5, whatever they're on. So it's a real problem. If anybody runs into it, it shows up like a jittery. Basically, the motor will be going full speed one direction and then just stop and go the other direction and then continue going full speed. It's a really, really annoying problem. So if you run into it, it'll be fixed on the next firmware update.
Do we know when that next firmware update will be?
I was told it would be end of last week, so I would imagine it'll be very soon.
All right. So do you think that's, I guess, a reason to hold off on potentially buying new ones?
No, I wouldn't not buy new ones because of that issue. That issue will be solved. If I was hesitant about buying new ones, it would be because of all of the issues happening. And full disclosure, we're on Team Rev. I love Rev products. I know Greg pretty well. I think they'll be fine. We're running them on our robot this year. But if you were to be hesitant at all, it would be, an overarching, feeling about how the rollout has gone for them. I would say the same thing of Krakens. If you were to buy Krakens right now, good luck getting them in time for your competition. What the vendors have done is pretty frustrating overall. They've put teams in a really bad position, and we're kind of just left to holding the whatever, right? We're left holding the bag, right? We got to try to figure out how to navigate, and probably the best solution for a majority of teams is good old fashioned Neo motors or Falcons if you've got a bunch of them. Use what you have, use what you know, and I wouldn't be waiting for new motors.
The Krakens are starting to ship. Like I know our team, so we bought 5 when they came out, like an hour and a half after they were released. Then we bought 2 more a week ago, and all 7 are getting to our shop on Tuesday.
Sure, but good luck with accessories. That's
Yeah,
the bigger thing.
that
You'll
is-
get the motor. The accessories are going to kill everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. For like Swerve, we have those on. Those are also coming this week for like we're just getting the pinion upgrade kit anyway. So
Yeah,
let us run Krakens there, and then like
hopefully it does come for you.
If any teams are running into that, not being able to get accessories, my advice would be to 3D print basically pulleys to go on there and pulley it to your first stage of a gearbox or something.
Those will work for it'll work for a very short amount of time. You'll get like 1 or 2 uses out of it for a prototype. 3D printed pinion adapters are not going to hold up in a competition, at least from talking to a few teams who have been doing that.
Yeah, they are selling 3D printed adapters that are made of metal for the Kraken shafts, and those are in stock. So that would be my advice.
Well, since we're talking about the Krakens, has anyone tried to adapt the Krakens to work with the Max Swerve modules? So that's our task on Tuesday.
I haven't, but now you've got me curious. Anyway, Ian, I finished the thing.
I'm pulling it up right now.
Did you say adapting Krakens with Rev Swerve?
Yeah.
Do you know of anyone who's done that with Falcons? Because as of now, I've only ever seen Neos ran on that.
I do not, but we're going to give it a shot with the Krakens here. Now that we're getting ours on Tuesday.
What do you think these advantages there, John?
Well, we've been waiting for the Max Swerve shafts to come in stock for the Vortex, and they are currently showing early February. So we're hoping we can get driving this week instead of waiting for those.
Has everyone gone and measured their carts to make sure that they are small enough to fit on the field?
I think our cart is field compliant.
Okay, Jason, I clearly have missed something. The carts are going on the field this year.
Yeah, there was a blog post. If your carts are allowed on the field, if they're small carts, and a small cart is less than 3 feet by 2.5 feet, which is like a pretty big cart. So my dad had built a cart for us a couple years ago, and it is 2.5 feet by 3 feet 2 inches. So my dad gets to build a new cart.
Another question going along with that is like teams that ran Mark IVs in the past, how do you lift your robot onto the field? Especially if your bumpers stick out kind of far beneath your frame rails. How do you actually lift it?
We have straps that like strap onto hooks on the robot that we just like pull up. I think we got it off like a yoga kit or something. It's kind of sketchy, but it worked.
Our girls just grab it by the bumper, set it out there.
Yeah, like there's not a lot of room in our design yet for like handles. We used to just do like an eye bolt on the corners with the Mark IVs, but now with Mark IVs you can't really do that. And I'm a little concerned because like, well, we went to the Gitch with Mark IVs, but it's not very fun lifting a robot. And that robot was 60 pounds, so this one will be less fun to lift.
Yeah, we put eye bolts on ours, and we have straps that have clip hooks, snap hooks on them. The eye bolts, since we've been doing Swerve, the eye bolts are sort of in the middle of the frame someplace. Well, towards the outsides, but not in the corners.
Hey, question about weight. Does getting close up to that weight limit make any difference in this game this year in terms of like defensive play or not being pushed around? But then with a whole bunch of Swerve bot fleet going on these progress reports, it seems like you wouldn't just be able to drag a robot around because you decide to ram into it. You're not sort of really ram into people, but it doesn't stop other people from doing it.
I know our team intends to basically maximize our weight, even if we don't have quite the full 125 pounds. We're probably going to add some steel to the bottom. It is advantageous to be heavy. Just you can't get bullied as easily by other robots. Makes you more stable too if your CG is even lower.
We weighed our robot on Saturday. We're going to set about 80 pounds, which means we're going to spend the next few weeks designing a trap mechanism to stick on the front to take up some of that rest of that weight.
Yeah, and because I asked also because if we, let's say whatever the design we have right now, if we don't make any kind of a change to it, we would need to create some kind of a weight distribution to account for the center of gravity, in terms of when the arm goes up and or when you going up on the chain, so it's a little bit more of a smoother operation than trying to be slacking off of that and bump into your alliance partner robot, and you know how it goes.
Hey, Jeremiah, I've got a very different take on that. I think there's a huge advantage to being really light in this game. I think everyone being on Swerve, you're not too concerned about getting pushed around because you should be running away from people anyway. And it's a game where the top teams are going to be cycling in under 10 seconds. And really, it's all about maximizing your drivetrain speed after you've figured out how to shoot an intake. You just need to get up and down the field as quickly as possible. So we're going to try to be as light as we can. And that kind of segues into another question that I have, maybe for John or other LRIs and robot inspectors who are on here. How are you feeling about TPU wheels? What has the chatter been on the LRI Slack? I know Al is aware of this. 111's doing a whole bunch of testing with 3D printed TPU wheels like Team 88 used last year. It first came out and they updated their rules in which it can be it can be a non-inflexible, let's double negative. They have to be flexible studs, essentially. Mm-hmm. I'm really curious to see if that'll be called consistently, and hopefully there can be some clarification before teams, commit to any specific wheel.
Yeah, that team update was because of the TPU wheels to try and help add clarity. there between, what is a hard plastic versus soft plastic or flexible or whatever, right? So, I think the answer is going to be it depends with what you print with and how you're using it on the field. If you are damaging the field, damaging the carpet, there's going to be a problem and you're going to have to fix it. If you aren't damaging, then I think it should be okay.
That'll get pretty tough, I think, only because any wheel can damage the field if you're spinning them in place.
It's situational. It is
for sure.
You know what I mean, though.
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't envy how that's going to be called. That it's not going to be a fun rule. I don't think there will be probably Chief Delphi threads about people complaining about their wheels, and I am debating: do we even bother, or do we stick with our black neoprene that we know is legal?
Mm-hmm.
I'll chime in on the KnightKrawler side. I know that we've talked about trying to be light. We also have to not tip over backwards. So I don't know where we're going to end up in terms of weight, but I think our school of thought is in line with Ryan's, is that lighter is faster and faster is better. But until we have things working, it's hard to say what that's going to shake out.
Yeah, most teams building robots that can go underneath the stage, because I feel like if you're under 24 inches, your center of gravity is going to be pretty low, and tipping's not really going to be happening a whole lot.
I would like to say that low robots can still tip over, especially if they're going fast. I'm not referencing my team's robot. I am referencing my team's robot from last year, but which had some tipping issues at its first two events. But I know that also for teams like us, we're doing an arm on our robot. Because of that, we are looking at a steel belly pan for that, just because we don't want to necessarily be able to tip over. And if we're stuck with level 1 gearing, we're going to have that acceleration either way, because we have way too powerful motors for the under geared modules. So in the drivetrain calculations, it didn't seem to make too big of a difference.
One thing to consider with acceleration, though, is like, at least from my experience, robots don't flip when they're speeding up; they flip when they're slowing down. And that your gear ratio doesn't matter a whole lot if your motors go from 100% power to brake mode in 1/10 of a second. So we've done some calculations with ours, and there's almost no way we're going to be able to flip it. But it is all about how quickly you're slowing down.
Or turning. If you start going sideways, similar thing. I will say that I think there's going to be a lot of robots this year with an arm that has a lot of weight up high. And so if you've got that arm even at a 60 or 70 degree angle and you stop too quick or change directions too quick, I think there's a real risk of tipping this year.
I think we might also see quite a bit of clotheslining on the chains, especially because they hang down lower in the center than on the edges. Teams are going to be a little confident driving through there. I think we're also going to see a lot of really hard slams into the stage as they're trying to do that motion to slide to the side as they're swerving across there. So it's another thing to consider with driving underneath the stage, is you have to know where you're going.
Well, I think driving on it, that's one of our strategy for being a support bot, is being able to get away quickly and be able to cycle game pieces to the amp. However, being able to go under that stage, it should be an absolute necessary. This is my way away from this bully, or not like, hey, you zippity zap zooming, because if something get caught accidentally, your arm goes up, that's done, And so, but if it is a design mechanism that will help you absolutely when you need it, I think it's a good thing too. And my question to the group is, with a very low robot, even with a, let's say, a 36-inch height, total height. Just height. Don't point the scissor up to your eye like that. Sorry. 36-inch height with your arm elevated, fully extended. Even if you have the arm at some various angle in the front, you should on a Swerve module. Should you really be afraid of tipping if you had your wheels set on coast? Just in case you weren't hard braking, any of that stuff. I know that's very likely with tank drives, with those 6-wheel drives, where going buck and bronco with those is easier. And I don't know if that's a problem. This is our first season exploring with Swerve, so we don't know much about any of it. So, is there any warning to say for your driver, beware of this and beware of that in case you don't want to, flip over?
I will say for this off-season, going from a tank drive to a Swerve drive on our 2023 bot, in some ways we were almost tipping less because the Swerve wheels just weren't as bouncy, and we think it might be due to the fact that they were in the corners instead of less inwards. But like when our drivers would come into like stopping to place, there would be a lot less jiggly and like tippy motion. So it's hard to say how that affects different robots, but for us, the Swerve made us a lot less tippy compared to a tank.
And that's my experience too, because I had in our gym, I took the control from I wanted to push this myself, and I put something on top of the robot just to give it that, top heavy. It's like, how would it work out if you did this? Because I wanted to take the blame in case something broke, and he wouldn't feel bad. And there was a lot more room for forgiveness than it would have been with the kit apart tank drive that we used the previous 2 seasons.
My recommendation would be to make sure you have a slew rate limiter in your code so you can't immediately go from full speed forward to full speed backwards. The SDS modules are a little bit, it's our only experience, but they seem beefier and that, but I've still seen teams tear up belts, tear the treads off their wheels, and tip their robot over. So slew rate limiters can help transition from forward to back or stopping without tearing up your wheels or tearing up your modules.
Another thing that can help a lot is actually you can space up the SDS modules. I think you could do it with the Rev ones too. You can space them up so that your grind clearance is lower. Cheesy did that in 2022. Pretty good effect. And definitely in the code, a slew rate limiter, as well as being conscious of which neutral mode you're using on your motors. If they're brake mode, you're going to be able to stop really quickly, but that might not be what you're looking for. So you might have some sort of code to automatically switch between brake and coast.
Anti-lock robot brakes.
How is everybody doing with their Swerve code? Because KnightKrawler has been inundated with requests for help. We are currently helping 5 teams with their Swerve code. Is anyone else experiencing this? And everybody wants to do Swerve. And so they're trying to do Swerve. And then you just have situations where teams lost their person who knows how to do Swerve. And they're trying to, they've already successfully done Swerve, but now they no longer have the knowledge to do it again. What is everyone else's experience here?
That's been us too. So we were helping out Cards in Coon Rapids today with their Swerve code. We have accidentally become the go-to Neo Swerve code on Chief Delphi, which is kind of cool, but also unfortunate because I posted our link around too much because we're just running basically base Falcon Swerve, but we adapted it to Neos and brought it from 2022 into 2024. So it's, fairly simple and straightforward, and it has all the documentation that base Falcon Swerve has. But that means every week or so I get some messages on Chief Delphi asking for help with it, which has been, it's fun to help out with it. And if any team has questions about using Neos with Swerve, you can reach out to me or my team, or with Swerve Drive Specialties modules specifically. But it definitely feels like now if teams are just kind of being like, oh yeah, we'll just buy Swerve and we'll figure it out, and then when they don't have the coding capacity to do the Swerve, it's more of a, some other team will help us figure it out, or some other team will give us their code and we don't have to worry about it, which I think there's a lot of gracious professionalism there, which I think is cool. But I also think it might be, it'd be nice if there were more resources available that would allow people to self-guide their way through it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've been recommending the Rev modules to all the brand new teams based on the feedback that Ryan has shared and other teams have shared. And since then, I've even gotten better feedback about brand new to Swerve and Rev just works. I think that SDS has to do something similar. It's just super frustrating to, and WPI lib is not innocent here either. The documentation and samples just aren't very good, and it makes troubleshooting really difficult.
Yeah, Scott, this is Tracy. I would agree. I mean, we did the Rev literally in the off season in the summer, before off season, and other than because we had the NavX in it, we had to reverse one value. I mean, they just worked, right? So yeah, if you're a new team or if you have a rookie team asking, do the Rev because they're a lot simpler. They may not be quite as fast and some other things, but from a coding perspective, mechanical, they work pretty well out of the box.
So important note on the speed, Rev is dropping a higher speed module option, which will be out, hopefully soon, because they offer it up to, I believe, 25 feet per second, which would be faster than L3. And obviously I'm biased, but I think the Rev modules are awesome, and I'll keep plugging for them with every new team that asks about Swerve.
See, what I like about the Rev module is the assembly is easy, very less complicated. The only problem I have with them is some of their parts. You have to soak it in acetone to get the rust, off of it. And then you grease it. Besides that, then you're good. With the code, we have no coder on our team, and so it really helps that whatever they have packaged right out of the package, if you adapt your motor controllers to whatever they have in that code, we've not had a problem with that. And just to add is with the speed thing, being a relatively new team, and if any new team is coming up onto a newer team coming up to Swerve, I don't know if you should be as concerned with how fast you can go versus how better you can control the speed that they have, because they gave you three different high speed, mid speed, and low, and so being able to just control it more efficiently and probably better than trying to go 25 feet per second and then you crash into something and then you would the rest of the time. I think it's an adjustment thing, and so having low speed may not be a disadvantage if you master controlling that.
Well,
important. Sorry, go ahead, Scott.
What I'm taking from Ryan's comment is a lot of people say SDS is better because it's faster, and that sounds like it's either not true anymore or won't be true soon. So even for high performing teams, I honestly, we've been using SDS from the start, and we did not buy new modules this year where we're cannibalizing off of last year's robot, because that robot doesn't make a good demo bot, and so we don't know that we'd ever run it again anyway. So we're cannibalizing, but I'm struggling to not buy Rev next year. I mean, that's not my choice. That the students have to make that decision, but I'm really frustrated with the challenges that SDS has created. And, this is our third year using Swerve. And I suspect when we get the new modules on the new robot, we'll probably spend more time getting it all set up just right compared to a team that's never done Rev and just plugs it in and goes. And that's not great. That's not a great product experience when you're always struggling to get things done on time, and troubleshooting, it takes time away.
I think our team has had, and maybe this is different from what I've heard from other teams, but we haven't really had issues with our Swerve Drive Specialties modules. I think our biggest frustration with Swerve Drive Specialties right now is that none of their products and their like accessories are like really ever in stock, and they're in stock for a week and then they're out of stock, and then you don't know when they're coming back in stock. So like even for, you know, stocking up on new pinions, that's, you know, we don't know when we're going to be able to get more neo pinions, you know, to press fit on, you know, if we do switch to vortexes, right? And so that's why we're only doing drive motors with it, but also vortexes aren't really needed for the turning motors because the drive motors are keyed. But you know, you can't get extra supplies of those, or you know, you can't really change the gear levels versus Rev, where all the gear levels come in the box. It's, you know, wait and you hope that enough teams don't buy L3 modules, so then there's some L3 gears left over and you're able to buy them, because that's kind of what I got from the emails we've had from Swerve Drive Specialties. But I think at least our experiences with the construction and then driving it, I mean, we put ours together within the span of like 3 days, and our code worked the first time pretty well, and it's continued to work well, which is nice at least.
Hey Ryan, I have a question for you. Since you're the Drive Insider, so when we had to calibrate, and we had to do that like 3-4 different times to calibrate and recalibrate the wheel and offset it, is that gonna be an always thing, or is that something that can be fixed?
I might not be the best one to answer that, to be honest. The kids that I have on the team deal with a lot of that stuff. I mean, I know the basics, but I've been really fortunate to have really good really good kids on the team, to be honest with you.
Yeah, in terms of calibration, I know we're not a Rev Swerve team, but it's once in a while. It's like whenever you notice it starts getting bad or your tread starts wearing a little bit, you just bring a long stick with you to align your modules. Usually build that into your cart somewhere, figure out some way, because you're always going to forget something. And then also set up a button. It makes it a lot more convenient than like, you know, writing down the numbers and typing it back in as a constant. Like we just have one button, you click it and it's calibrated. So
Is anybody who's running SDS running the yet another generic library now that they're out of beta? They're into. Are they running a modification of the SDS or somebody else's code?
we've swapped to the CTRE code now, and then a highly modified version of that, just so that, because especially with new Phoenix 6, it's like don't really want to figure that out that much. But the yet another generic Swerve library, it looks really nice. I mean, I've written Swerve custom Swerve code like 8 or 9 times now, and it looks very generic certainly, but I like some of the features that it has too. So if it works, it works, you know. Another thing to bring up around the Swerve and code especially is like, I don't know, kind of the point of it. It seems like a lot of teams that are struggling with the code, it's because they don't really have the programming capacity to do that. And what it seems like to me is that there's a lot of pressure for teams to run Swerve because it gives you such an advantage. But because of the abundance of pre-existing code and like, you know, you just plug it in, you play, well, you're not really learning a lot out of that. I'm somebody who I taught myself how to code through Swerve. That was my first Java code ever, was making our Swerve work. And it's really valuable to write that custom. And it feels kind of weird to have like, you know, these teams say, well, we just plugged it in and it worked within half an hour, but nobody on our team knows how to write it. I don't know. It doesn't sit quite right with me.
I think you can transfer that to mechanical too, like buying a grate shooter. Like, are you learning any machining processes by buying a grate shooter?
Yeah,
that's where first is going though. You know?
That's the argument I've always had against Limelight. Hundreds and hundreds of hours of vision code you just paid $400 to acquire. It's the same reason why they don't let you just buy a shooter in a box type deals. You need to build it, but for some reason we don't think about code that way. I will say that we've talked about the yet another Swerve library, and we're gun shy on using a third-party library because we like to keep our robots running, especially if they're a good demo robot. And a lot of times those things fall to maintenance, and then WPI has a terrible history of backwards compatibility. They just don't do backwards compatibility. So then these libraries that have dependencies built in based on things that are no longer compatible with the current WPI lib makes it hard to keep old robots running if you want to use them as a test platform.
I think something that makes like the coding situation kind of annoying too is that there's a lot of teams that'll, that they're asking for help and they're like, well, it was working, but we don't really know why, because they've plugged in it, played, and it worked for a while, but then something's not working. And it feels to me like, well, you didn't really learn why it works, and so you're not really getting that experience out of it. So yeah, it makes you more competitive, but what's the trade-off?
Yeah, and I think almost in some ways, I think with the Swerve code, and I've also been noticing it recently because a lot of teams are like, oh, we downloaded your code and it was working, but now it's not working, and it's like, it's because and what I usually recommend is teams, instead of just downloading the code, kind of take the code line by line, right, and actually write in the code and ask themselves what everything is doing and rewrite all of the comments and figure it out, because then you kind of going through that process of figuring out why things do what they do allows you to actually when you're ready to code autonomous, right, you could customize those features. And I think that we're kind of losing that with Swerve, and I'm not sure if the same thing is happening with custom vision. At least our team runs Limelight, and it's been really cool to get like object detection pipelines in 30 minutes, 10 minutes, which is, but it also kind of feels like it we don't have to come up with the training set or anything, which feels a little disingenuous. But also it's allowing us to do further things with our vision code that we wouldn't be able to think about shooting while moving, if we were stuck the whole season trying to figure out how to get odometry to integrate with April tags.
That's the exact point right there. And there's always a new mountain to climb. Let's raise the floor. Let's make it easy for people to do the basic stuff so they can work on fun stuff. There's always new ways to learn and use this program to teach kids things. Robots that move, robots that score, Swerve drives are all very inspirational. They're more inspirational than using drill motors and barely able to get a drivetrain going. So I mean, this argument comes up all the time everywhere, and it's really to each your own. Make the program what you want, but at the end of the day, moving robots are a good thing.
So I think from my short experience in this program, I think my first year when I attempted this was in 2021, no 2020 when COVID became a thing and ruined the world. But what I noticed in that short time was there were certain level of coaches' involvement on robot stuff, and so all of this is one big snowball of discussion in every areas of a robot team. It's like how much is what, and I think Nicole's last email had that in there. Is like the answer is like whatever it takes to inspire your team to exceed to somewhere bigger than wherever they are currently. And I see that, and there's argument on both sides too. Do you lower defense? Do you because for a low resource team like us, I know for a fact that my kids, if they don't experience any ounce of success, we will not have a program. We have not won a regional, but we've two regionals where we mid-ranked, and all season they've done incredible at 2 off-season events, and so they use those as successes to push them to a different level. And even the past 2 years with these kids, I've seen the amount of growth than we had when we came to 10,000 legs in 2022. That was an incredible experience, and I still have kids on the team from that regional still on the team, and they still plan on being on the team until they graduate. And that's good to have a kid from 7th grade that will continue through that intend on being on being part of this program until he graduates high school. It's I just want to say it's an argument to go on both. I'm a teacher, and I like to push kids, but there's a level where you can motivate with something that dangled in front of them practical, where they can achieve, and there's a way you can also push, and then they fall into this gap of learned helplessness and failure, because if they're used to nothing but failure in their life, they'll be like, this is just one of those things that was different, So just something to say in that.
Go for it, Tom. You're muted.
Thanks. I don't know who's moderating, maybe Scott, but I'm not sure if this is a topic that anybody wants to talk about, but we got an interesting set of emails from Students First. Is that something that anyone else got?
Yeah, we have also received those emails.
Mm-hmm.
Any sort of...
But the background behind that is there's a student on a team who got kicked off the team or left the team or is no longer on the team, and they are not happy about it. And so they've started this campaign, if you will.
Can you give us a brief on what you're talking about? Because I don't think I got the email.
The Student First, it's basically they want to, they're going against mentor-built robots, and they're saying that their team is too mentor-driven and they need to be more student-driven, and they were kicked off the team because they spoke out about this. And who knows how much of any of it is true with regards to their particular team. And so this this Student First organization they're starting is supposed to advocate for mentors to have a less active role on teams and to try and get First to implement rules around that.
Yeah, I'm considering replying back to the email they sent today, because they said that the majority of First teams are primarily funded by the schools. And I'd like to know where they got that data, because I'd like to know what part of the country they live in, where the majority of First teams are primarily funded by the schools.
We've received absolutely none, virtually ever, from the school.
So either it's a blatant lie to promote their platform and their reasoning, or they have access to some data that I've never seen before, and I'd love to see to help further our cause in Minnesota.
How does that fact or non-fact correlate with what they're trying to do? I don't get the connection.
Well, the rationale, I'm paraphrasing because I've already removed the email from my inbox, but because it's school funded and it should be educational driven, that's what they're basically saying. Mentors shouldn't be involved or should be less involved, which, I'm not opposed to that. I feel like that's how we run things in KnightKrawler. And, I feel like that's the normal way to do things. But I also, like John said, this feels like somebody who didn't get their way, and I don't know how true it is. And it's just like, stand back and observe is kind of where I'm at right now. I mean, we've certainly had disgruntled students on our team. We've had a student who was removed from the team for being bad behavior because they were disgruntled, but I don't know what the situation is, and I don't want to jump into those waters.
I've talked to the head coach of the team that is involved, and it's all blatant lies about the team itself. It is a disgruntled student. They've raised something like $27,000 on a GoFundMe or some fundraising platform for free speech. The whole thing is really just being supported by, I think, two or three kids and their fairly well off parents, and it's a load of crap. Their whole thing is based on a lie. I got the email and I replied back saying, I please don't contact me. How did you get my email? And really just, I would mark them as spam and move on. It's probably the best way to handle it.
No, I don't have any backstory. I don't want to pass judgment. It's just not something I want to participate in, not knowing anything more than the rumors that I've heard. I guess KnightKrawler hasn't talked about all the things that we've built and are driving around. We built nothing. We are still waiting for L3 parts that we're not going to get, we don't think, at this point. So we were hoping to get these L3 gears, and then we could move our Swerve modules from last year, which are running L2s, tear them all apart, replace all the bearings, put them all back together, build our chassis. And so we're at that point where we're not going to wait anymore. We're going to run our L2s from last year, replace all the bearings and everything, and then we're going to start actually building a robot this week. So we feel like we're fairly far behind. We've done lots of great prototype testing. Our CAD I feel like our CAD's in a good place. Still some unanswered questions, but I don't know how many people are surprised by that. You guys are much farther along and doing much better, it seems, than we are this year.
You talked about swapping out the bearings in your Swerve modules. Do you swap out your bearings every single season?
This is the first time we've reused modules. So we bought bearings last fall because we had already decided we were going to reuse the MK4Is that we had, and we weren't going to buy new modules. So we have the bearings. We've had them for a while, but this is the first time we're reusing modules. We've only got two sets of modules. We have the MK3s, and then we have the 4Is. And so when they stopped selling the MK3s, we're like, well, let's buy the new ones, because you couldn't even buy a complete module for the MK3s to have a backup module at that point. So we bought the MK4Is, and then this is the first time we're ever going to reuse a set. So we're replacing the bearings. We'll rebuild them and replace the bearings when we put our new chassis together.
Sounds like a good precautionary thing, but I've never heard of any bearing failure.
We had a bearing failure. If 10K, if the finals for 10K went 2 matches, had it gone 3, we would have had to sit it out because we lost a bearing in the last 10 seconds of finals 2 match.
That was your first event.
10K was our second, but other than that, we didn't experience any Swerve issues. Actually, our only major robot damage for the last year was in a preseason event this year at EMCC, where just we brought our elevator down onto one of the nodes, and then it just broke the elevator. But other than that, we haven't experienced any issues in terms of robustness with the MK4Is, and we don't expect to.
Because I wasn't planning on switching bearings, but maybe that's something I should think about. We bent a plate on our MK4s somehow, the main mounting plate.
We suspect the reason why the bearing exploded was because we when we assembled the module, we might have put one of the shafts slightly out of line, and then that just caused the shaft constantly shaking, and then eventually the bearing would give out. So we suspect that was just us not not following the instructions.
Yeah.
Were those your
What bearing was it? Was it the big
Yeah.
bearing or was it one of the smaller ones?
It was shoot, I forget if it's for I believe it's for the drive. Yeah. But it's a tiny one that goes through the
Yeah.
through like the wheel, if that makes, or like it connects to the that bevel on the wheel and then it
Yeah.
goes up.
Yeah, I know the one that you're talking about. I'm the person who's torn apart our Swerve modules too many times.
Is KnightKrawler still using the 832 mounting holes for your Mark IV eyes? Because we've talked a little bit about those. They've swapped to 1032 now for the main bolts to hold it into your frame, but definitely don't want to try machining that out to 1032. But we've also actually broken the bolts holding our swerves in, so
That's interesting. I want to hear about your guys' stories about like the base plate of the Swerve modules breaking and like the bolts and whatnot. But we haven't experienced any issues with their number 8 bolts, so I don't think we're gonna switch them out.
another kind of question that I had is, are most teams doing horizontal rollers for the shooter, or are there still teams that are doing like sort of vertical rollers? Because we've prototyped some of both, but I was wondering if there's any like success with rollers that are going this way instead of this way.
We prototyped both initially. The horizontal ones, the ones that most teams are not doing, they work just fine. It's just that when the note gets destroyed, they probably start to fail more than the what do you call that? Like when the wheels are horizontal. So we just prototype them as like our precautionary in case having the wheels horizontal just didn't work for some reason or just worked less. But yeah.
We got one team doing each, so, and not a lot of shots out of either one, so I can't really say in our experience what is better, but we'll find out.
Just purely looking at the physics, the vertical, you should have better spin than the horizontal, since you're sort of in a way just spitting it out instead of like if you go off on the side of the notes, you kind of you put a spin on the note. I think in that respect, that would be the only, well, from just not talking about the note being destroyed and how that, I don't know any of that yet because we are not even near that type of the world. But if you're just looking at putting a spin on a note, that would be the only advantage is that, a spinning flying object goes a little further. So then just,
That's true. That's true, Jeremiah. But how far away are you planning to shoot from?
Exactly. That's what I was gonna say. Well, it may not be a big issue since you don't want to. You can't be halfway coordinated. Maybe you may try, but you don't want to.
Yeah, I suspect you are going to have one of the most accurate shooters on the field at any competition before spin's going to matter. As long as you can get that thing to come out of your shooter flat.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to start tipping down or tipping up before you would score, where spin would stabilize the flatness.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It
depends. We don't have a working shooter yet, so I don't know. That's just a theory. It's just pure speculation. But I suspect for most of your shots, you're going to be so close that the spin's not going to matter. But I could eat those words in a couple of weeks. So.
Another thing that you can consider is like if you have the horizontal rollers, you can have offset wheels. So like one wheel's bigger on one side than the other. So your service speed is higher. You could also have more wheels on one side than the other. So there's definitely ways to impart a spin with pretty much any design.
Right.
You really don't need spin unless you're trying to shoot from beyond the podium.
Yeah.
Like 15 to 20 feet away is start when the notes start to either tail up or tail down when you're shooting them really hard. We've prototyped both horizontal and vertical. Both of them work well. If you're doing a vertically oriented shaft, so the wheel is horizontal, and you're imparting the force on the sides of the note, you're kind of capped on your range because there's only so much compression, and that compression is also going to change throughout the course of of an event as the notes wear in. If you're compressing the note on the top and the bottom, the theory is that compression is going to change a lot less throughout the course of an event, and so you're able to get a lot more shot power from that orientation shooter. If your goals are to shoot from the podium and closer, which should be the case for a majority of teams, it won't matter what shooter style you go with. The best thing you can do is to finish it early, play with it a lot, and practice and get good with it.
Hey, question here for all the Max Swerve people in the room, aka Ryan and somebody else, I think Jeremy. Anyway, so Rev sent out a bunch of the plastic in the wheels, and that's kind of what we use for practice. We haven't put on our we have when we ordered our first set, we bought 4 of the aluminum wheels, and we have not put the blue nitrile, uh, uh, rolls on those yet. We did get a template to cut the blue nitrile and then screw those on those. Now my question is, um, those of you that have used those, how often do you have to change them at a typical competition? I'm asking because I want to know if how much to stock. We don't have much endless money, and so I don't want to buy a bunch of something that we may not necessarily.
So anybody commenting about Rev Max Swerve wheels who has experience from last year has a really biased perspective. We emptied the Rev booth out at the World Championship. We used well over 100 wheels throughout the course of the year. They're molded ones. We were swapping them out every 1 to 3 matches. The 2.0 wheels, we've driven around on those quite a bit now. They are dramatically better than the 1.0 or the 1.1 wheels we had last year. With that being said, I would say we're probably going to go with aluminum wheels with tread. But if you don't already have the aluminum wheels, you're in trouble because they're sold out both at ThriftyBot and Rev.
Yeah.
I would say for the aluminum wheels, they get really beat up, or at least they did on the charging station. I think this year it'll be better because there's really nothing for them to get chipped on. But the aluminum wheels should get you through 2 events at least. I would think. Tread, you're changing once per event, but the wheel itself should get you through 2
events, not match, right?
And I will say that the STS modules we're running Blue Nitrile, or we did the first year we had them, and several other teams that were running STS the first year too. I think Green Machine was probably the one that they went through tread a lot at several times at a regional where we, like Brian said, we changed it. We went through the entire regional and we didn't lose a tread, and it had to do with slew rate limiter because they were changing directions too fast and they were burning up their tread. So if your drive code is kind of properly not slamming on the brakes and sliding across the carpet type of deal, your tread will last longer.
The other thing to know with like code wise with tread is if you're noticing that the edges of your tread are super worn, but the middle's like barely worn at all, it probably means that your turn motors are not tuned correctly. In 2022, we tried running a sim with Mark Farce as our turn motor, and it was really bad. And so we just tear up the edges of the tread, but the center would always be fully intact. So that's a big sign that your code is not tuned right.
We plan to be using Coulson's this year, or 3D printed wheels. We're still messing with those, but Coulson's are what we're most likely going to be running this year, mainly because we did a tread swap once, and it took our team, the 2 people doing it, like a solid 2 hours to do it because it was just a pain. We didn't want to deal with the possibility of at an event, you lose a tread and then you have to quickly swap it. And we were just really worried about that. And from especially also losing coefficient of friction, because we noticed that our autos were working weirdly once the tread worn down. We just decided that Coulson's were probably going to be the way to go, even though we'll be taking a hit on the coefficient of friction. At the same time, in the drivetrain calculations we did, it wasn't going to cause any wheel slippage, and so that will only, and with defense being more of, you kind of drive around it rather than pushing defense, we're hopefully not too worried about that. I think we'll also, at least I'll push for bringing our 4 treaded wheels to the events just in case we need to swap back to high coefficient of friction at some point. But for the most part, I think Coulson's, they've been working really great for us, and they don't, mark up the entire gym floor if you accidentally drive off the carpet for 1 second.
As the team who been using the Rev Swerve modules, I would say that the treaded wheels, we haven't really had any problems needing to replace the tread or anything, and it survived 3 off seasons. We did check them occasionally and stuff, and there's minor edge fringing by the 3rd off season, but relatively they've stayed okay. Though the plastic ones, they kind of, after a couple matches, they would kind of just fall off. And I can attest to how many Ryan went through, as we inherited his bag of broken and semi-broken ones. And the plastic Rev ones, if you're going with those, be prepared to have one for every match to every 2 matches. There's ways to help them stay on better, but they're just not necessary. They just don't work near as well as the tread.
Right, except that, as Ryan said, they do have the new version 2 of those plastic molded ones out, and that does adhere a lot better and holds up a lot better than those old ones. So you could probably get by with maybe one replacement set for an event.
Speaking of Rev, sorry, Riley, you had your hand up. Sorry.
It's not a problem. Theoretically, if someone was particularly desperate for treaded wheels, we could work with a machine shop sponsor to get you those. It would be quite a favor to ask, though, since those are not fun to make.
Thank you. I may take you up on that offer. Ryan and Swerve people. So what do you use to grease the outside gear? That's the turn. Is that the turn gear? Yeah.
Just red lithium grease for us works great.
So do you do that between every matches, right?
No, we don't even do it that much. Probably we check it maybe 2-3 times per event.
And when you use because I noticed when we didn't use any Loctite, those bolts just came flying off. One of the basketball kids came up to me, I think this is one of yours. And I'm like, yep, you were right. But
you need to Loctite every single bolt. One of us, we didn't even put enough on, and let's just say they can bind up the whole gearbox and bend a 1030 screw.
We lost
half of the screw thread Loctite. You put there's it's really hard to be accessed on the Loctite in this case.
Yeah, we had so on our Rev, so the turn motor, the 550, and they have the gearbox that's attached to that. One of those tiny skinny one came out and bent it because it got stuck in one of the drive gear, and I'm like, oh, okay, so that's why. But you learn the hard way. It was fun.
Yeah, this is something I've shared with a couple of people. This is an image of our Swerve wheel at a outreach event because one of the people assembling them originally did not Loctite the bolts, and then the bolts came out, and it did a little bit of damage to just about everything on that module, which was a fun learning experience.
So Ian, oh, sorry, go on.
Just quick, I was gonna comment on the Coulson stuff. We ran Coulson's at off season on our MK4s, kind of homemade with some Thrifty Bot influence. We were kind of working with them a little bit, and they're great. Would never go back to treaded wheels for any reason, ever, because they are a catastrophe to change the treads. Like, I wouldn't even let students do it. I would do it myself, because you will strip those out. You're going to strip those wheels out. For sure. It will happen. So I'm kind of surprised that nothing has come with Rev on a Coulson. I know they're narrower than the regular one, but man, if you can get those Coulson wheels on a Rev module somehow, that would be great.
We're planning on running Coulsons this year.
See, I got a whole bunch of plastic ones that I'm more than one for backup plan. Backup to the backup to the backup.
I'm really surprised to hear all the issues with the tread. Our team ran Blue Nitrile last year and did, I think, 4 events on them on one set of Blue Nitrile tread, and it was pretty much brand new afterward. And then swapping them, I think it comes down to, like, you have to prepare the tread beforehand. You have to really, like, we take a, you know what tool it is, but we really try and get those holes a little bit bigger than they ship from SDS. And we mostly punch our own tread to save a bunch of money. And we'll punch them slightly oversized, and that makes sure that you don't really strip the screws. It takes a little technique, so we just train people on that before competition. It takes us maybe half an hour. Like in 2022, when we were swapping them, you know, every day at competition, it was just like, you know, you get to the evening and swap the tread for half an hour, and it's pretty fun.
50 Bots has a template for the wheel and to cut the thread. If you go on their website, I had 3313 use that 3D printer to, you know, make us though. It's really neat. They print out the wheel, so then, you know, to guide you where to drill the holes and everything, and so then, you know, you can just do that yourself, and like you said, probably save you a ton more money than have, you know. I don't think if Rev has a way of even giving you that, you know.
Rev has a paper template. You could easily make it just like what the Thrifty Bot is.
Mhm.
For our off season, we had the Rev aluminum wheels, but those were out of stock, so we ordered the Thrifty Bot ones. And the advantage also was they're 1 inch and they sell 1 inch tread.
Yeah.
So that's what we switched to. Now we did find we printed it 3D printed it at 102%, and it was like the perfect size. And it was great because you could pre-drill the tread where the screws go,
Yeah.
and it worked really well. But yeah, you have to be careful to make sure you're not cross-threading those screws into an aluminum hub.
Okay, folks, it is beyond 8:30 here. Anybody want to make a last-minute question or comment before we wrap it up for tonight?
I would comment that I don't know who's in the metro area here, but the local practice fields will be opening up the next Saturday or two, and I hope that everyone that can show up will show up.
You know, we're really excited to have Mira back finally. It'll be really fun to be back there. It's been a while.
If you are in the Alexandria area, but you can shoot me a message so I know you. They have a full field in Alexandria. We have it open 8:30 to noon on Saturday, so we're gonna be out there though. So, but if anyone in this area, I don't know if anyone here, but if you know anyone in this area that want to have a field experience, so please come out, because we built our kit bot on a Swerve, and so that's what our driver is gonna be using to be practice driving while we work on our competition robot.
All right. Anyone else?
Yeah, just one thing about this meeting in general. How is this like put out there? Like how how do people hear about this? Because I only just heard about this at a CMRC hub meeting from one of the mentors. Like,
It's like a Fight Club.
There's a mailing list. I'll get you the URL. There's a mailing list. Nicole Shao has put it in the first updates. Upper Midwest. It's not Upper Midwest. Whatever the newsletter she kicks out once or twice a week. It's been there. I post it in the FRC mentor chat for the state of Minnesota. So it's hard to get the word out, but we've been trying really hard since there isn't really kind of a I don't know, there's not really a great centralized place for it. But here, I will post this in the chat right now. We finally set up a page on our website, and that's where you can go and see the YouTube, the replay list. So we record all these. You can watch all the past calls out on YouTube. If you want to host a conversation, which please do, it would be really awesome if we could fill up the calendar. We've got next week, we're talking about April tags, but there's tons and tons of opening beyond that. So if you have questions, if you want advice, if you want to talk about a specific topic, please click that sign up to host link. You can add it to your calendar so you get a reminder every Sunday. And then there's the link for the mailing list. And I usually send out the mail reminder anywhere between Thursday and Sunday morning for the call. So good question. Thanks, Silas. Anyone else?
On that, the other thing that Kevin did in our Slack, which was good for our students, is just building a bot that says like, hey, this meeting is happening today. And we've had higher student engagement just like a little reminder that this is happening, and they don't necessarily have to come and speak, just to listen and just get that reminder out there for students too, because we love it when students participate as well.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I guess we will see you next week, and we'll talk about April tags.
Thank you.